Automobile insurance is something that almost every person has or is covered by, because everybody either drives a car or has a car. And even if you don't own a vehicle with insurance, the vehicle you drive will have insurance on it by the owner, and it normally will cover you as a driver. One of the areas that often comes up as a question is regarding rental cars. If you rent a vehicle from a rental agency, for example, Budget, Hertz, Enterprise, does your automobile insurance cover that rental? And if it does, should you purchase the additional loss damage waiver or collision damage waiver that the rental agency offers when you rent the vehicle? Sometimes it's $10, $15, $20 a day. And many times a person renting a vehicle, the customer, is going to decline that coverage because they feel like their car insurance policy will cover them driving the vehicle, or maybe your credit card covers you, or some other coverage is in place. And some of that may be true. But before you go ahead and jump to that conclusion, let's take a look at reasons why it may be financially beneficial to take and accept that collision damage waiver or that insurance company waiver. Certainly, the rejection of it is kind of like rejecting extended warranties on a computer that you buy. It's like a profit center for the seller. But unlike a warranty on a computer, your liability may extend more than what you think. For example, if you buy a computer at Best Buy and they offer you an extended warranty for $100, you might think, well, this computer cost me $1,000, so the worst I can lose is $1,000, so it's not worth it. With a rent-a-car, your potential losses can be thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, some of which may not be covered by your insurance. So let's take a look at why there may be financially sound reasons to accept the additional insurance offered by a rent-a-car agency. And you can make your own decision. We're not telling you what to do. You can make your own decision. But you should make your decision with all the information that's available. So your insurance, certainly on your primary vehicle, will very likely cover you on your rent-a-car for if you get an accident. And here's an example of a typical insurance policy. It says coverage for other cars. The liability coverage extends to the use by an insured or a temporary substitute car or non-owned car. So basically you're covered as long as a coverage that you have on your vehicle would extend to the other vehicle that you're renting. You're in good shape. There's some exclusions to that. You want to make sure your exclusions don't lose your coverage. For example, if you're using a vehicle for business use, you might not be covered. Even if you have insurance that covers your use of that rent-a-car, there's 2 or 3 types of loss that will probably not be covered, or it might be a fight. We'll talk about what those are. The first is a phrase called loss of use. Loss of use. So if you are driving that rent-a-car and it becomes in an accident, even if it's not your fault, if somebody smashes into the side of that rent-a-car you're driving while you're parked at a stop sign, and that car's damaged significantly, hopefully nobody's hurt, you're safe, you're sound, you get back to the rent-a-car place, you get another car, that's fine. The vehicle that you were renting is now damaged and is no longer able to be used for that rental agency to rent out to customers. If it's off the road for a month to get repaired, or 3 weeks to get repaired at the body shop, during that 3 weeks, every single day that the car's off the road, they can't collect that $80 or $90 or $100 a day rental fee from a potential customer. that loss of use by the rental car company may not be covered by your insurance. It's a gray area. A lot of insurance companies won't cover it, or up to a certain limit. And that limit can get exceeded very quickly. Think about it. Rent-a-car rates right now are very, very high. And if you have not rented a car recently, you can go online and look at what rental rates are just for a cheap basic car. They're $50, $60, $70. This is a car that used to rent for $20 a day. Higher end vehicles can now be in the $150 to $200 a day range. We saw a rental last week for a Jeep, just a regular Jeep Wrangler, that was $220 a day. So imagine you rented that Jeep Wrangler and somebody rear ends you at a stop sign. And that Jeep is off the road for, let's say, 20 days. At $220 a day, that's $4,000 plus in loss of use that rental company could say you're liable for because they can't rent out the car. That may not be covered by your primary insurance. Might be, but it probably isn't. Check with your insurance. It may not specifically say it. If it doesn't specifically say it in your policy, it's probably not going to be covered, or it's going to be a hassle to try to get it covered. What about another potential loss referred to as diminished value? Let's say that Jeep that you're driving was worth $30,000. It had a hard rear end accident. It's repaired, but now the market value is diminished because every car history is now available to the next buyer. Carfax, you see it advertised all the time. In fact, it's a requirement that a dealer or a seller or an insurance company discloses to future buyers any significant damage. So now you have a $30,000 vehicle that had a $10,000 repair on it, and the next buyer is going to see it. That value of the vehicle is going to be diminished. It could be $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000. You can ask a dealer, look, if you had a $30,000 vehicle that somebody wanted to bring for a trade-in, but it had a history of a damage of $10,000, even though it's repaired, how much would you give for it? Well, I'd chop off $3,000 off the value, or $4,000 off the value, because that damage history is required to be disclosed to the new buyer. So now that diminished value, let's call it $3,000 on top of the $4,000. Now you're $7,000 worth of loss to that rental company that may not be covered by your insurance. Let's talk about another potential gap in coverage. The repair estimate for that hypothetical Jeep Wrangler at the body shop, let's say it's $8,000. Well, your insurance company is going to have language in the policy that says they're going to pay reasonable repair cost for the damage. However, if you had a vehicle that you were driving, your own vehicle, and it was damaged, they would direct you to a body shop that they were comfortable with, they knew about, and they could negotiate with that body shop. The body shop might say, hey, it's $10,000 damage, and the insurance company would go to them and say, look, we'll give you $7,000, and they'll have a direct contract with that body shop. The rental car company has their own body shop, and that body shop might say this damage is $11,000. Your insurance company might say, we don't agree with this repair estimate. It's inflated. It's too much. And we're only going to pay $7,000 because that's what's fair. The body shop and the rental car company is not going to discount it for your insurance company. So there might be another $2,000 or $3,000 that your insurance company might not pay, but the rental car company can still assess to you because they're going to claim that's what it costs to fix the car. So now you add another $2,000. Now you're up almost $10,000 in potential costs. to your insurance that's not paid. And the last thing is the deductible. If you're in an accident, no matter what's covered or what's not, you still have a deductible on your policy that could be $500, could be $1,000. Even if that's the only thing that's not paid, you still have to come out of pocket that much. So for a potential liability of $7,000, $8,000, $10,000, a collision damage waiver, loss damage waiver, at that point doesn't seem like a big expense anymore. You still may not want to do it. That's fine. But don't decline a rental loss damage waiver just because you think you're covered for everything. If you feel like, well, I know I'm not covered for those things, but the risk is low. I don't think I'm going to get in an accident. And if I am, I'm okay paying the bill. Then that's fine. Go ahead and decline the waiver. But if you were not aware of these potential gaps in coverage for your insurance or your credit card or whoever you think would cover it, consider that loss damage waiver. And how much is it? $10 a day, $15 a day? Even if you rent for 8 days, that's maybe $100. Yeah, it's $100 cash out of your pocket. But if somebody went to you and said, look, you have a potential $10,000 liability, would you be willing to waive that for $100? Well, it might be worth doing. In fact, if you really look at how much a day you're paying for your primary insurance, it's not that much more. If you have a couple cars on your policy and you're paying $2,500 a year for insurance, that's probably $7 or $8 a day you're paying for your own insurance anyways. So paying $10 or $15 a day, yeah, it's more, but you're only paying it for a few days or a week maybe. Now, what happens if you don't pay the insurance company or the rental company what they claim that you owe them? And the other thing is they can collect that money instantly on your credit card. So if you had an accident with a vehicle and there's damage and you don't have a loss damage waiver, they can instantly charge your credit card the full amount of what they think it's going to be the same day that the accident happens. They can say, well, we think that the estimate's going to be $7,000, loss of use. We're going to hit your card for $7,000 today. And you've agreed to doing that. Here's an example of a rent-a-car agreement from Budget. And again, we're not coming down on Budget. We don't think they're bad. We don't think this is unreasonable. Most of this is going to be the same from any company. We're just using it as an example. And it tells you that the rental charges, what they include, and what they can do for collecting these fees. In the event we use a third-party collection agency, you have to pay their fees too. So if you don't pay them or they have a cost to collect from you, you have no right to contest any fraction. They can also contact you or your employer. Collections. If you do not pay all amounts due to us under the rental agreement upon demand, then they can charge you a late fee on the highest balance, on the past due balance at the highest rate. Also pay for any cost, including court costs, attorney's fees. They can also report deficiency to a credit reporting agency. They authorize to charge any amounts due to us, including to charges, costs, reference above, to that credit or debit card. So they can hit your card. So that's another reason that maybe $70, $80, $100, even if it's $200 for the rental, that it might give you peace of mind to sleep better at night knowing that this is not hanging over your head. Still, you may not want to do it, but at least if you go into that decision with proper knowledge, you'll be making a good decision. Now, before you take my word for it, check your auto policy. Ask your insurance agent if loss of use would be covered, if diminished value would be covered on a rent-a-car. And we recommend doing it by email so you have it in writing, because that way if something happens later, they can say, well, I never said that. One thing to know about the supplemental liability insurance, that loss damage waiver, this does not apply for liability or property damage arising out of prohibited use of the vehicle. So even if you have loss damage waiver, if you use the vehicle in a way that's not allowed, it's going to void the whole thing. What is prohibited use? You notice the whole thing of this whole policy, nothing is bold or italic except for prohibited use. That's why it's important. A violation of this paragraph will automatically terminate your rental, is an exclusion, and voids all liability protection and optional services, including loss damage waiver. So what are the prohibited uses? You permit the car to be used by anyone other than an authorized driver. So if you give the car to somebody to drive, you're not covered. To carry passenger or property for hire or for more passenger than the car has seatbelts to carry. Think about that. You know, in your own car, if you had an extra person that they had to sit in somebody's lap, well, it would be no big deal. But if you overload the vehicle on a rental, that could be putting your liability at great risk. Tow or push anything. Well, you're probably not going to be towing something with a rent-a-car, but if somebody broke down and you're trying to push them off the road, God forbid something happens then. You're probably not going to race a vehicle, but what about unpaved roads? What if you're driving and you go on a dirt road? It doesn't have to necessarily be a undeveloped area, just a dirt road. There's many dirt roads that are public roads of the dirt. Obviously, if you're doing a DUI, you're not going to be covered. Controlled substance or any federally controlled substance listed under CSA. Well, marijuana is legal in a lot of states, but it's still a controlled substance. So you might want to consider that when you're driving a rent-a-car. If you're doing something that could be charged as a crime, even a misdemeanor. If you have stolen goods in the vehicle, illegal devices, not covered. Reckless driving, not covered. If the car is driven into Mexico without permission. The last thing is make sure that you report anything to the rent-a-car company. So there's some exclusions even if you have this coverage. So when you're renting a car, just make sure when they're handing you those keys, you're taking on a pretty big liability. A lot of liability you can cover with your own insurance or the loss damage waiver. But consider you taking those keys as a very serious obligation for the full value of the car. If it's a $30,000 car, you are the caretaker of that $30,000, and you have to make sure that you understand your liability. Again, this isn't legal advice. We're not attorneys. We're not trying to tell you how to make legal determinations, but it's just something where a common decision made by consumers to reject a policy offered by a rent-a-car company is often made. Everybody just says, reject the insurance, reject the insurance. And for a lot of extra coverage, like extended warranties on computers or cell phones, it may be a valid financial decision to do that because your liability doesn't extend beyond what you paid for the service or product. With a rent-a-car, your liability extends beyond what you're paying for the rent-a-car. If your rent-a-car bill for the week is going to be $700, your liability that you're taking into your hands is way more than $700. It's tens of thousands of dollars, many of which may not be covered. You might not know about it. Even your insurance agent might have to look it up. So consider that when you're making the decision. And, if you decide not to, that's fine. And it still could be a valid decision for you based on your finances. But don't just reject out of hand the rental car loss damage waiver. And I'll give you a little hint. Many insurance professionals in the insurance industry who know insurance inside and out take this insurance. You might think, well, if you're in the insurance industry, you're not going to buy more insurance. Well, many high-level insurance executives that work for brokers, agencies, insurers, the major insurance companies, when they rent a car, a lot of people that we know in the insurance industry always take any extra insurance that's available for a rent-a-car. For how small of an actual price it is, it's a huge protection of liability. It seems like a lot compared to the rental price. If you're renting a car for $40 or $50 a day and it costs $20 a day, it's almost as much as the rent-a-car. But when you really look at what you're paying for, it could be a value. Again, it's up to you, personal decision. But go into it fully informed. Read your auto policy. Talk to your insurance agent. Next time you're talking to an attorney, maybe ask them what they think about it, because attorneys can give you some good legal advice. But it's just another alternate perspective on a decision that's often made by consumers that sometimes is made with incomplete information about your coverage from your credit card or from your primary vehicle insurance.